Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Maury High School senior Robert Richard Snipes, the Secretary of Education Arne Duncan, and the Vice President of the United States, Joe Biden.
What an honor it is today, not only for our school, but for our city. We have two individuals that can greatly impact the very building we're sitting in today. Vice President Joe Biden and Secretary of Education Arne Duncan have taken time out of their busy schedule to come and share with us the benefit and accessibility of post-secondary education. This does not apply to only college-bound seniors, but all of us as future voters and future parents of children that will someday be in the same position we are today. Some would say my family has lived the typical American dream. My mom joined the military at a young age and worked her way through the ranks to make a fairly comfortable life for us. With college fast approaching, we have often dreaded the topic of how we're going to pay for it. Are we going to have to take out loans, refinance the house, or worse, sell my shoes? This is the case all too often for most families today. Okay, maybe not the shoes. Hard work and good grades just doesn't seem to cut it anymore. Luckily, the GI Bill my mom signed over to me covers most of my tuition, and I'm hopefully getting a scholarship for running track. I finally feel at ease and ready for my collegiate years ahead of me. The time I've been afforded here at Maury High School has been essential to this process. Although most of my classmates and I have the same typical college visions, many of us have not chosen the traditional path. A young lady in my class is enlisted in the Army to further her education, whereas another guy in my class has decided to go to a local community college and then transfer to VMI. The options are endless nowadays. Whether it be a vocational school or even a 2-year degree program, post-secondary education is available for everybody. It is my honor and my privilege to introduce to you the Secretary of Education, Mr. Arne Duncan.
You're good, man. You're good. Don't sell those shoes. You're leaving over the Please give another round of applause to Robert for his great work. I could no more have done that as a high school senior than flown to the moon, so really, really impressive. The Vice President and I are thrilled to be here, and I'll be pretty brief, and I know in an audience like this, you guys get how fundamentally important it is not just to graduate from high school, but to go to college. And what is the Vice President and I travel the country, what worries us so much is not just in inner city communities, but in middle class communities, more and more families are starting to think that college isn't for them. It's for people who don't look like them. It's for rich folks. And as a country, we can't be a strong country, we can't be a strong nation if the opportunity to go to college is not there for everybody. So we've worked extraordinarily hard to make college more affordable and accessible. We've simplified the financial aid form itself, which was a huge barrier to entry. We put $40 billion in new money behind Pell Grants, simply stop subsidizing banks. Stop subsidizing banks, put all that money into young people. That was very controversial in Washington. We thought it made common sense. Thanks to the President and the Vice President and the support of Congress, we got that done. Tried to significantly increase Perkins Loans. We want to double work-study opportunities. We want to make paying those loans back at the back end much more affordable through income-based repayment. And for those of you thinking of going into public service, the next generation of teachers, and we desperately need you, folks working in government, folks working in nonprofits, after 10 years of public service, all your debt will be erased and forgiven. And we want to bring that great talent into the public sector. But we can't do this alone. We're trying to be a great partner. We're trying to walk the walk. Please hold us accountable for that. But we need states to continue to invest in education. We can't do it all by ourselves at the federal level. And we need colleges and universities to keep down their tuition. And when tuition is skyrocketing much higher than the rate of inflation, we have to challenge that. So we're trying to give you a lot more information, a lot more transparency, so you can make good choices. You need to understand what those colleges' graduation rates are. You need to understand what their tuition is, not just the first year, but over 4 years. And if we can arm you with good information, you guys are smart, you're savvy, you'll make great choices. A couple quick things. To our young people here, how many of you are planning to go to some form of higher education, some form of college? Raise your hand. Give yourselves a round of applause. Whether it's 4-year universities, 2-year community college, trade, technical, vocational training, it doesn't matter, but some form of higher education has to be the goal for every single one of you. If you drop out of high school, there are no good jobs out there, none in the legal economy. If you just have a high school diploma, there are almost no good jobs out there. And the jobs of the future are going to require some form of higher education. And then the goal is not to go to college, the goal is to graduate. So whether it's 3 years or 4 years or 5 years, 6 years, doesn't matter, we're going to get that diploma. To your families, thank you so much for your hard work. Please give your parents here a huge round of applause for their support. We know times are tough, and we know the sacrifices you're making for your children. And again, we want to do everything we can to be a good partner. So we look forward to having a great conversation, walking through some of these issues with you. And I'm just thrilled to be here with the Vice President. This is a very, very personal battle for him. I've loved traveling the country and talking to young people all around the country. Neither one of his parents went to college. And he'll talk through some of the challenges his family faced thinking about how to finance that. He's someone who has an absolute passion for education. He believes in the tremendous potential of every single one of you. If he ever wavered in education, he would get kicked out of his house. His wife, Jill Biden, has been teaching at community college for over 30 years, lifelong educator, could be doing lots of other things now. She is still teaching at a community college because that's her great passion. But this is a man with a tremendous heart for education, who understands your commitment, who understands the sacrifices you're making, and wants to do everything he can to make that dream, the American dream of going to college, possible for everyone. Please give a warm round of applause to our Vice President Biden.
Hello, Commodore. Great to see you all. Thank you. Thank you all very much. I tell you what, it's great to be here. It's great to be in a military town. It's great to be with a group of people. How many of your moms or dads serve in the United States military? Raise your hand. Well, we owe you, kids. We owe you, and I mean this sincerely. We owe you big. You know, just since 9/11, over 2,800,000 of your parents and people after them joined the United States military. 2,800,000. Over 1,400,000 have been in and out of Afghanistan and Iraq. And I've been in and out of those places over 22, 23 times. They're god-awful environments. Your parents, many of your parents, put their lives on the line for this country. There's a great phrase by a famous British poet. He said, "They also serve who only stand and wait." My son spent a year in Iraq. My son is a major in the United States Army. He also happens to be the Attorney General of Delaware, and he volunteered. He wanted to get like your parents. He wanted to do something for his country. And I watched with my 2 grandchildren, his 2 children, younger than y'all, but I watched the sacrifice they make. The games missed, the birthdays missed, the Christmases, the Thanksgiving. My wife still fills up, she talks about a Thanksgiving dinner with the only family that gets together looking down and seeing that empty seat. A lot of you have seen that. A lot of you have seen that. We don't give you enough credit. We don't. The rest of America, who honors what your parents do. But because this is a war being fought, these wars are being fought by 1%, of the American public. It doesn't mean that 99% of the American public has an obligation to acknowledge it. My wife and Michelle Obama are working with military families. And my wife has an expression. She said, what you should do for a family of a deployed military person is you don't have to do much. Just one act of kindness. One act of kindness. You taking your kids to the movies, the parents? Take the next door kid, the neighbor's kids to the movies if they're young. Up my way, if it snows, go shovel their driveway. Just one act of kindness. Because all of you know who have parents who've been deployed. You're not looking for anybody to pat you on the back. But it is nice to know that other people know, just that they know what you're missing, what you're giving up, what you're giving up for the country. And so on behalf of the President and all of us, I really mean it. From the bottom of my heart, I say thank you. I say thank you very, very much, because we owe you as much as we owe your moms and dads for the sacrifices you make to allow your parents to serve this country. So give yourselves a round of applause. I told Robert when he was getting off the stage, heck, I mean, the Secretary said he'd have trouble standing up here speaking. I used to stutter very badly. I was senior class president. The hardest speech I ever made in my life was at graduation, having to stand up, and all I did was introduce the class to our parents, and I really was having trouble. You see, the King's speech, that was me, for real. That was how I was when I was in high school. It's pretty debilitating stuff, but the point is, to have the kind of poise Robert has. I just gave him one piece of advice. I know the University of New Hampshire well, where he's going. Don't sell your shoes, man. It's cold up there. You may be able in some months in Virginia walk around in your bare feet, but you cannot do it in New Hampshire. So don't sell your shoes, and I promise you, Arne and I and the President are going to go out of our way to make sure none of you have to sell your shoes. Can't promise your parents that, but I tell you, I promise you all that. How many parents here? Thank you for being here. Thank you for the incredible interest you take in your children, and thank you for all you do. I want to also thank the superintendent, Superintendent Spencer. I got to meet his grandson, who I think is going to be a special kid. This kid has that something special. I said, how old are you? 15? He said, no, 5. I said, I knew there was a 5 in there somewhere, but that's that handsome boy. Can you imagine you're 5 years old, your grandpa making you get dressed up with a coat and tie to meet some guy you never even heard of? I tell you what, that's a good boy. And Principal Berg, thank you very much. You got a great school here. We did a lot of research. And Mayor Frame, thank you for the warm welcome. I appreciate it very, very much. Mayor Frame was kind enough to spend some time with me. And State Senator Yvonne Miller, where's the Senator? Good to see you. Thank you. Great to be with you again. And thanks for the passport into your district. I appreciate it. And I also want to pay special thanks. I wanted him to come up on the stage, but he said, no, it's my job to do this. But I want a guy has been a close personal friend of mine for a long, long time. I'm a bit prejudiced. I think he's a great, great congressman, Bobby Scott. Bobby, stand up. Bobby and I have worked together a long, long time, particularly in the Judiciary Committee on crime bill, on the Violence Against Women Act, a whole bunch of stuff. Bobby's been a great leader, and he's a great friend. I just want to thank you, Bobby, for all you've helped me do and in my career and what you continue to do. State Delegate Kenneth Alexander's here, I'm told. At least I was told that. He's smart. He left. State Delegate Ward, I was told, may be here. But if they thank you very much. Thank you very much. Now, before I get serious, I got an ulterior motive here. Where's Madison Hahn? Madison, where are you? Where is she? Madison, I know I'm embarrassing you, but before I leave, I want my picture with you, okay? I came, and I want you to autograph the picture, because when you win the 200 or 100 in the Olympics, I want to say, you know me. Congratulations, kid. Congratulations. Go Madison. My staff see where Madison is. You make sure to grab Madison and bring her backstage, because I really do want to picture Madison. I really do. Congratulations, honey. You're a hell of an athlete. Get the way. And speaking of great athletes, see the guy behind me here? This guy's a great basketball player. This guy was drafted by the pros, went off to play with the pros and going instead of directly into the NBA, went out like a lot of guys do, ended up playing, some play in Europe, some play in Australia. He went to Australia and played, and basketball as a pro. The best thing ever, my mom used to say, there's a reason for everything. He went down to Australia. He didn't go to the NBA, but guess what he did? He came back with the most beautiful wife you ever saw with an Aussie accent. But by the way, this guy's not only a great academic, but this guy was a great, great college ball player and a great basketball player, a great pro as well. Look, folks, let me get right to it. This has been a tense time for all of you. I saw those hands go up who want to go on to school beyond high school. And I know sitting in the audience, you bring me back, it's hard to believe, but bring me back to my senior year. And as the year was winding down, April 1st was that god-awful date when we've got those answers from most of the colleges around the country that you applied to. Some of you are overjoyed, some of you are disappointed, and some of you are scared to live the devil out of your parents because now you're in and they say, oh my God, how am I going to pay for this? I'm being serious. And there's only one thing I want to say to those of you who did not get into the school you applied to. What college you go to, not if you go, what college you go to is probably the least important decision you'll make in your life. Because every college is different for every student. Every college is different. I had my three children went to college and graduate school. Thank God, because of my dad and mom, all my siblings, we went to college. And it's amazing. Some of us got in the exact school we wanted and didn't like it. Some of us got in the school we didn't want to go to and we loved it. And so the point I want to make to you all is the most important decision you're going to make is who your partner for life is going to be. That's the important decision. And I hope you're going to, and you women, not till 30. Don't think about it till 30, okay? No guys till age 30. That's all. I speak for every father in America when I say that. Now, I might add, it did not work for my daughter. It did not work for my granddaughter so far, but I keep trying. I'm one of four, I was the oldest of four children. My sister's my best friend in the world. We went to the same university together. I graduated, she graduated with honors. She was the homecoming queen, literally, not figuratively. My sister is better than me in every way. She's managed every one of my campaigns for real, including my campaigns for president. And but my dad used to have an expression, Joey, remember, you have one job, Joey. Keep the guys away from your sister. That was my job. I did it pretty darn well for a while. But at any rate, but look, so the key here is going to school. The key here is going to school. Look, you know, I can, as I said, I can remember, and so can Arnie, we were talking about it on the plane coming down. I can remember this moment of both excitement, a little apprehension, and but also anticipation of those of you who are seniors. Some of you are juniors, I know, and you'll be going through it next year. But it is it's an exciting time. It's an exciting time. Everything's brand new, what you're about to experience. And I'll say at the beginning, which I'll conclude with at the end, that remember, there's not a darn thing you cannot do. There's nothing you're incapable of doing. Nobody I know, and I've got to meet every head of state in the world for the past 35 years, every major world leader, from Golda Meir to to Brezhnev, to all these folks back a long time ago. I can't think of anybody who was a senior had anything more than the average senior in this class. So keep that in mind. Keep that in mind as you go off on this new journey you all have. Some of it's intimidating, but most of it, and most of you will find it exhilarating. I'm also looking out at the parents here, because I can remember put myself in their spot when my kids were applying to school and they got into school. I hope you didn't make the mistake I made, parents, saying whatever school you get into, I'll help you get there. That's a big mistake. Don't do that. And, but all kidding aside, I wondered when my kids got into school, and either the first one they wanted or another school. I literally wondered, how was I going to help them? How was I going to be able to help pay for this? Now, you all look at me and you probably say, well, vice presidents, all vice presidents are wealthy and in great shape. The parents, I'll remind them, when I got elected vice president, did my financial disclosure, the Washington Post had a headline. It said, and I quote, "It's probable no man has ever assumed the office with fewer assets than Joe Biden." I assume they were talking financial assets. See, I made a mistake, not a mistake. I think I did it the right way, but I got elected to the United States Senate when I was 29 years old. Not, as Bobby will tell you, that's not old enough. Old enough to be a congressman, not old enough to be a senator. You have to be 30 years old. So I had to wait. I had to wait about 18 days, I think that's what it was, to qualify to actually be sworn in as a United States Senator. When I got elected, I still had my college loans to pay off. And I thought the deal was when you go into politics, you're not supposed to make money. So that's the one promise I kept. I haven't made any money. And so for me, borrowing the money, and I was making a really good salary when my kids were in school. I was getting paid, as a senator, I was getting paid $60,000 a year. But I had 2 in school at the same time, 2 in private schools at private universities. And I couldn't pay it. And I couldn't borrow the money because my income was more than you'd expect to be able to borrow the money. And so I was kind of in a spot. But I had something that your parents don't have. I had a home that continued to go up in value. It's called equity in your home. So you pay $200,000 for a home and you put down $50,000, and as the home increases in value to $250,000, you have the $50,000 you put down, you have the $50,000 that the home is now worth. So you have an equity of about $100,000. And sometimes the bank, if it looks like things are going to continue to go in the real estate market, they'll let you borrow against your home. They'll put a second mortgage on your home. That's how my kids got through school, because they were going through school in the 90s. Although my daughter graduated her graduate degree from the University of Pennsylvania, it wasn't until 2003. But that was the time frame, and prices were going up. So my home value was going up, and I was able to borrow the money. But with this god-awful recession we inherited, what happened to a lot of your parents found that equity they had in their homes was gone. Americans lost $1.7 trillion in value. And that was from middle-class folks. Middle-class folks who thought they were going to be able to do this and borrow against their home to send their child to college or keep a child in college. And some of them had what they call these things called 401ks. These are kind of retirement programs that companies have. You can put money in it. Well, the stock market crashed. It went down to almost 6,000 from, it was above 13,000, 14,000. And so they lost the ability to go out there and do what I did, borrow the money against my house to be able to send their kids to school. And one of the things that the president and I and Arne and the rest of us have in common in the outfit I work with is we all come from the same kind of background. We weren't poor, but we were middle class. I guess technically I was lower middle class. We never thought of it that way in terms of income. But that's the kind of family we all came from. Michelle came from that kind of family, the south side of Chicago. My wife Jill in Willow Grove, Pennsylvania, up by the Naval Air Station, used to be up there. And the same with Barack and me. And so when we came into office, we realized that not a one of us would be standing where we are. There's no possibility I'd be Vice President of the United States of America. There's no possibility Barack Obama would be President of the United States. There's no possibility Michelle Obama would be a lawyer having gone to Princeton and Harvard Law School. There's no possibility my wife Jill from Willow Grove would have gotten an undergraduate degree, 2 master's degrees, and a doctorate degree and be teaching. None. None. If we weren't able to borrow, our parents weren't able to borrow money, if we weren't able to borrow it, and we weren't able to get scholarships. So folks, when we came into office, we decided that in the middle of this god-awful recession that was really, really difficult, parents had hit a perfect storm. Their incomes were down. If they still had jobs, like God willing your parents have, their income has been stagnant. They haven't made any more money on average than they were making 5 or 10 years ago. And if they don't have a job, it's a disaster. And also, as Arne said, the Secretary said, tuitions have gone up exponentially over the last 20 years, about 300% if I'm not mistaken, way faster than inflation. And so your parents and you were in sort of that perfect storm. So we set out to do something about it. And by the way, the reason we did, and Bobby helped on this, and members of our friends in the Congress helped. The reason we did is not just to help middle-class families and aspiring families in the middle class, but if I'm supposedly an expert on foreign policy. That's supposedly my background. And there's an old bad joke, an expert's anyone from out of town with a briefcase. I don't have a briefcase with me. But I do know a fair amount about American foreign policy. And I do an awful lot of that for the President. I've traveled over 560,000 miles in the air since sworn in at the President's request around the world. And guess what? I was at a conference with all these experts on national security, which supposedly I know something about. And I was asked in the closing conference, so these are the brightest minds, some of the brightest minds in the world on national security issues. And they said, what's the single most important thing Mr. Vice President of the United States can do to maintain its qualitative edge over the rest of the world? And the answer was easy. Have the best educated population in the world. The best educated population in the world. This is about national security. This is about the national interest, not just helping, because I always get criticized for being middle-class Joe, which I'm proud of, but I'm middle-class Joe, and I always talk about the middle class. It's more than that. When the middle class is not growing, everybody suffers. The wealthy, the poor. It is the backbone of America. And the rest, the thing that's the most critical portion of most middle-class people. Do you know anybody, rich or poor, who doesn't dream their kid could go to college? I've not met anybody anywhere. If they want to, if they're qualified. I don't know anybody who doesn't want their child to have the opportunities that Barack had, that Michelle had, that Joe Biden had, that Jill Biden had. So folks, that's what this is all about. It's about the national interest. So every time, my opponents try to say, well, Biden is just trying to give away money, to middle-class folks, hey, man, I won't get into that. It's more than that. It's not just equity, it's about the national interest. Admiral, you cannot have the Navy you want without the best educated people in the world. And so look, we set out to do a couple things, and I'll be brief on this. Number one, we said, hey, look, as Arne said, we were paying, and banks aren't bad guys. I'm not into this sort of class warfare stuff. Banks aren't bad guys. Bankers are good, decent people. But we were paying, you, the American taxpayer, were paying $60 billion to banks to process the loan. So you went for a loan, honey, from a bank with your mom and dad to get to college. The bank legitimately charges a fee to process that loan. Total cost of processing all those loans for the next 10 years is $60 billion. We didn't go at it because we wanted to be anti-banking. We just said, it's better. Well, how about if we just took that $60 billion, eliminated the middleman, and increased assistance to students getting to college? So we did three things right off the bat. We said, number one, all you parents who have incomes, and you can go higher, but incomes up to $160,000, and it phases out after that, you got 1 or 2 children in school, it's still a strain. So we said, here's what you can do. Tax day, for every kid you have in college, you can take $2,500 tax credit. Now, when I was a senior in high school, I had no idea the difference between a tax credit and tax break. It simply means this: if your mom and dad owe their federal taxes $2,000, they don't have to pay any tax if they spent $2,500 to get their kid to school. If they owe $2,500, they don't have to pay any tax. If they owe $3,000, they pay $500. That makes a difference in most middle-class people's lives. That's a year's worth of groceries. That's paying for this god-awful gas prices going up. That's whether or not you can pay, in the family I come from, your automobile insurance, or whether or not you're going to be able to make that payment. It matters. If you got 2 kids in school at the same time, you can take $5,000 if your tax liability is that high. So we did a second thing. And by the way, the number of people in America that qualify for that are literally in the millions. Right here in the state of Virginia, I think it's something like 280,000. I'll get you the exact number. No, 160, hang on a second, I'll get the exact number. There are, well, I can't find it. But I think it's close to 200. And then we said, here's the deal. We also, if you come from a family where the income isn't much over $50,000, then you can get a Pell Grant, not a loan, a direct grant. A direct grant. And there were 6 million kids in America getting Pell Grants when we came to office. But guess what? The college tuition going up, Pell Grants weren't going up. So we increased the amount of money you get in a Pell Grant by another $800 to $5,800, which will pay for almost any state tuition in most states. Tuition, not room and board, tuition. Get any community college. And then we said, guess what? We're going to increase it. So right now, instead of there being 6 million students in school with Pell Grants who couldn't be there without the grants, there are now 9 million. 3 million more qualified Americans, qualified to go to college, in college. That's a big deal. That's a big deal. And we're in a situation where it matters. Those 3 million people, they're spread out all over the country. Right here in Virginia, 190,000 of your fellow students are in college because of Pell Grants. Put another way, 190,000 fewer, in all probability, 190,000 fewer Virginians qualified for college would be able to attend college. Again, it's an investment in the national interest. And then we found out, look, when I graduated from school, I was elected to the United States Senate. It was the first year I was able to pay off my student loan finally. Paid it all off. Well, guess what? Mine was minimal compared to that. Although relative to tuition, it was about the same. Well, guess what? The average student graduating from a university here in the state of Virginia, nationwide, the same thing, graduates with a diploma. They get handed a diploma and a bill for $25,000. That's how much they owe because they had to borrow money to get to college. 25 grand. That's more than the first house I owned was worth. I'm old, aren't I? Tell me I don't look that old, okay? All kidding aside, but seriously. And by the way, if they went to a private school, a private university, it's more like $55,000, $60,000, $65,000. And guess what? That changes your options in your life. So let's say you wanted to go become a school teacher in Norfolk. I'm told the starting salary is about $38,000 for a first-year teacher. Well, we said, look, you're not going to have to, you have to pay back your loan. You have to pay back your loan, but you don't have to pay back more than 10%, what they call disposable income. That means after you pay your rent, after you pay for your car, after you pay for your food, what's left is disposable income. You don't have to pay back any more than 10% of that any 1 year, as long as you continue to be in that position. That makes up a big difference. That means that if you're that Norfolk first-year teacher, instead of having to pay back $300 a month, you have to pay back only $180 a month. That's still a lot of money. But it's $120 to pay for food or get a better apartment or to pay your automobile insurance or whatever. And then we said, there's two more things we should be doing. Right now, there's work-study programs. My son did that in law school. It wasn't the federal program, it was the law school, but the same principle. And a work-study program pays you about $1,800 a year. And here's what it does. It says you can work 15 hours a week in a sponsored program while you're in school, and you get another roughly $1,800 towards your tuition. For a lot of people, that makes a big difference. That makes a big difference. And a lot of these programs are matched to your studies, matched to what you're doing. And so that's another thing we have. But only 100,000 students in all of America, there's only 100,000 slots, so we want to increase that to 200,000 slots. We think that's a wise investment. The third thing we want to do is, some of our friends think that we shouldn't be giving y'all that tax credit. Now, these are the same guys, by the way, who think we should continue the tax cut for people making over $1 million a year. They're good people, but continue that tax cut, but don't eliminate the tax break for middle-class folks. Well, we're fighting like the devil with Bobby's leadership to make sure that it expires this year. So we want to make sure we get a vote to continue the tax credit for middle-class families sending their kids to school. There's a third thing that we want to do, and I'll get off of this, and that is that we're in a situation where the interest rate that you pay, and this is boring stuff, but it matters to your parents and will matter to you, the interest rate you pay on a student loan is half as much as the normal interest rate. If we can give banks and other people breaks on what we've done for them to help bail them out, seems to me we ought to help in these economic times. Parents who are helping you pay these loans, and you all pay a lower interest rate. Well, guess what? This summer it's set to double, which will make a great deal of difference for an awful lot of middle-class families. So with Bobby's help, we're trying very hard to get the Congress to go along with us and say, hey, look, don't let that interest rate double. Don't do that. Don't do that. Because when you add all this up, it makes a big difference. It makes a big difference as to whether or not a lot of you in the neighborhood I come from are able to go to school. It's that basic. It's that basic. This goes for community college too, by the way. It's not just four-year colleges. My wife Jill teaches full-time as the second lady at 15 credits in Northern Virginia Community College. Says, and she's right, the best kept secret in America is America's community college system. It's a great avenue, particularly in the states like yours, and it's not statewide, but it exists in your state, where whatever credits you get in community college, you can transfer. So it cuts the cost of your education by probably a quarter. So you go to a community college for 2 years, then a four-year college the last 2 years. And so, but there's one last thing. There's these things called Perkins Loans. I remember I had them when I was in college. I didn't know what the God's name of Perkins loan was. All I knew was that I didn't qualify because my dad made about $200 more than you could make to qualify for a Perkins loan. And a Perkins loan says that you can borrow in school roughly another $2,000. I think it's $1,800. And right now, there are, in all the United States of America, 440,000, there's enough Perkins loan money to loan to 440,000 students. We think that should be 3 million students, because that's the number of qualified kids that are going out there in school and having to go to banks to borrow this money at a higher interest rate to get it done. So we think that you should be able to borrow at a lower interest rate and get these Perkins loans. So we're trying to get that extended as well. It's all for a simple purpose of strengthening the core of the United States of America. When Arne and I were in school, and I'm older than Arne, and when your principal and your teachers were in school, we ranked #1 in the world in the percentage of people we graduated from universities, from colleges. We now rank number 16. We're 16 in the world. Again, to quote my wife, any nation that out-educates us will out-compete us. How can we own the 21st century like we did the 20th as this great nation that we are, ranking 16th in the world? Can't do it. So the president has set a goal we're going to keep, that by the year 2020 we'll once again be #1 in the world. #1 in the world. So folks, the only way we can do that is get you to school, qualified students to school. We're not talking about getting unqualified people to school. We're talking about qualified students to get to school. It's an incredible wasting asset for a young person with a great mind to not be able to go to school. Now look, Arne raised the issue. For the first time, I say to the parents, there was a poll last year saying almost 50% of American parents wondered aloud, they didn't think that a college education was worth it anymore relative to the cost. 50%. I think it was slightly more than 50%. Well, I'm here to tell you it's worth it. A college education is worth it, and I mean 2 years as well as 4. Let me give you the numbers. It's worth it economically. Anyone graduating with a bachelor's degree from a 4-year college is going to, for the rest of their life, make on average $21,000 a year more than someone with merely a high school degree. That matters. If you have a degree from a community college, the average is closer to $8,000 a year more that you will make. It will affect where you can live, what you can do, whether you can send your kids to school. There's a second reason why it is incredibly important. And again, Secretary Duncan mentioned this. 60% of the jobs of the future, 60% of them are going to require a degree after high school. Whether you're working on a factory floor for the new $250 million plant being built in Charlotte, North Carolina by Siemens, average salary $70,000 a year, blue collar, you need advanced training just to handle the new equipment, just to understand what these new jobs are. 60% of those jobs. So it's going to make a difference whether you can get a job, a good paying, decent job. Lastly, it also makes a difference in a way that my dad used to say. My dad used to say from the time I was a kid, he never went to high school. My dad was a graceful, elegant, well-read man, never went to school. My dad used to say from the time I was a kid, Joey, you're going to college. I could never understand his fixation, why he wanted me to go to college. Because in my neighborhood, an awful lot of the people never went to college. And I'd always ask him why. I said, they can take your job from you, Joey, but they can never take your degree from you. And I thought, what in God's name difference does it make if I don't have a job and I have a degree? But it was something more. A college education gives you confidence. A college education reinforces your sense of self-worth. A college education gives you a standing in the community. A college education is more than about the money. It's more than about the jobs. It's about your mind. It's about your sense of your self-worth and self-satisfaction. And that can never be taken away from you. never be taken away from you. And it matters. My favorite poet, William Butler Yeats, said it better than anyone. He said, education is not filling a bucket, but lighting a fire. A college education is going to spark a fire that's going to burn in you for a lifetime. It not only gives you so many more opportunities, it gives you more confidence, it gives you a better sense of yourself, it just gives you a better shot. Look, you're the most qualified generation in American history, the most capable. Sitting out there among us is not only a future Olympian, but one of you are going to write the great American novel. Some of you literally are going to sit there. One of you out there is going to be part of the project that further breaks down the Human Genome Project and identifies the cancer gene and how to eliminate it. One of you out there or more is going to be involved in going to the photovoltaic process of dealing with being able to put together solar energy panels that you can generate electricity the same cost per kilowatt as coal. Some of you are future admirals. One of you or more is going to be a Secretary of State or a President of the United States. Not a joke. Not a joke. You are the most qualified generation in history. And we have an obligation. We have an obligation to equip you, or at least give you the opportunity to go out and plumb that potential. Because I'm telling you, the single most significant advantage we have over the rest of the world, the single most significant advantage is not the most powerful Navy in the world, which by a factor of 6 or 7, that's the case. Not all the other things you see. It is a population that is heterogeneous, is diverse, and feeds off of one another and all those new ideas. Steve Jobs, who passed away not long ago, there's a famous exchange he had with a student. I think it was at Stanford University in a forum like this. And one of the students said, "Mr. Jobs, what do I have to be more like you?" And he said, he used 2 words. He said, "Think different. Think different. Think different." And you can only think different in a society that's open and free. You can only think different in a society that encourages you to challenge orthodoxy. Not to be cynical, but to be skeptical. You don't have to accept any given out there. Challenge it. Challenge it all. Because were we not to have been made of a country of people who did nothing but challenge orthodoxy, we wouldn't be the most innovative country in the world. And one of you is going to be part of a project that's going to make the iPhone 4 look like a rotodial telephone someday. You think I'm kidding? I'll end by saying remember years ago, I spoke to the postal workers. And I said, y'all are making a mistake. You're focusing on retirement and the rest. You should focus on, this is in 1976 as a kid. I said, you should focus on being part of an industry that's going to allow me to pick up a phone and call my mother in Tucson, Arizona, and leave a text message for her. There was no such thing as text messaging then. And I'm no scientist. But folks, the things that are coming in your generation are mind-blowing. Just mind-blowing. And you got to be part of it. And the only way you can is with a good education. And that's what Barack and I are determined to see that you get. God bless you all, and may God protect our troops. Thank you very much. Thank you. With your permission, Arne will take any questions you have, and it doesn't matter, you can ask us anything. I'm not sure we'll have the answers, but I can tell you we will try to answer your questions, and we'll do it honestly. We got folks out here with microphones, So, Principal, do we have a little time to take questions? All right. Okay. First question. Let's get someone in this section. Anybody got a question? Don't jump, man. Don't jump.
Oh.
Can you all be quiet so I could hear, please? Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Hi. We've been talking about the healthcare reform in my government class with Miss O'Hearn, and I was wondering, what are you going to compromise on that at all with the Republicans?
Well, look, we'd love to compromise with the Republicans if they thought we should have health care. The problem is they don't. I'm not being facetious. I'm not being facetious. The big divide here is, and I respect the Republican position. There is a Republican position led by this Republican Party, and each party, by the way, parties change. Parties change. Democrats change some, Republicans change some, and I joke and say this is not your father's Republican Party. This is a much more, I don't know if they call it conservative or anti-government, but this is a different party than even 10 years ago with guys like Senator Dole and Senator Baker and even John McCain and so on. Now, so we weren't able to compromise because, in fairness to my Republican friends in the Congress and the candidates for president, they really don't think the government should be engaged at all in accommodating access to health care. They don't, and they think it should be done, some of them through the tax code say that, you'd be able to, deduct the cost of your health care. That's fine if you're able to have enough money to have a health care plan. If you don't have enough money to get one, then it's probably, they don't think it is necessary. For example, raise your hand if you know anybody under 18 years of age who either has asthma. You know anybody who has asthma? You know anybody under 18 years of age who has cerebral palsy? Anybody under 18 years of age who has a heart problem? Anybody under 18 years of age? Well, guess what? Right now, none of those folks can get insurance. The reason is they have what they call a pre-existing condition. And so what happens is the insurance company says, look, we're not going to insure you because you're too much of a risk, but we will insure you if you pay a real big premium. So for your mom and dad to be able, you can't get on their insurance policy at work or otherwise, in most cases. Some policies provide it because they're more generous. But they have to pay a lot extra, and they can't pay that. So the president and I think that is already the law, that anybody, any, quote, child, dependent, who has a pre-existing condition should automatically be covered by their parents' insurance policy. And we believe that if every insurance company has to do it, it's no disadvantage to one insurance company versus another. Well, our friends, Senator Santorum and Senator Romney and others, they don't think the government should be, quote, dictate that. So there's a lot of things. For example, right now, when you women get over 18 and you get out of school and you're married and you get pregnant, guess what? Pregnancy is a pre-existing condition. You didn't know that, did you? You think I'm joking? I'm not joking. Women get charged much higher rates for insurance policies than men. We don't think that's fair. We think everybody should be charged the same, whatever that is. So there's a lot of things in the law. A lot of you, when you go off to college, you are not going to be able to afford private insurance all on your own. So what we've changed the law that says up to age 26, you can stay on your mom and dad's policy and be covered, given your... Now again, I want to try to be fair here. There is a legitimate argument on the other side. There's a legitimate argument that says we'd like that all to be able to happen, but the government should not be engaged. This should all be through the private enterprise system. And that's a legitimate position. I disagree with it strongly. But I don't want to make fun of. I'm not saying that our Republican friends don't care about people. They care about people as much as we do. But they just don't think the government, just like they don't think the government should be providing these loans. They want to give great loans and or tax breaks to very wealthy people, not because they're selfish, because they think if the wealthy people have these loans, they'll create more jobs. They will, not loans, well, we loan the banks a lot, but these tax breaks. And it's a legitimate position. They call them, the job creators. So they say if the guy who's making, by the way, people making $8.4 million in the proposal a year are going to get over $800 billion in tax cuts under their proposal over the next 10 years. It's a legitimate thing because they think if they have that disposable income, more income, what they'll do is they'll invest it and that'll create good jobs. I disagree in terms of priorities, but that's the debate. So it's not that Republicans don't care or don't want to negotiate. They just think, especially these new Republicans, now I don't mean that in a bad way, the newly elected Republicans who are now leading the Republican Party in the Congress, they don't think this is a legitimate thing for government to do. I respect that view. We disagree with it. Okay, yes. Let's go over in this section here. Anybody out here?
Thanks.
Fire away.
It seems to me that, oddly enough, the bipartisanship is considered by both parties to be merely caving in. It seems like they consider caving in completely to the other party to be bipartisanship.
Sorry, I didn't hear the first part of your question.
Never mind.
No, it's important. No, caving in. You said caving in.
Yes.
And not being bipartisan? In other words, or they're caving in to be bipartisan?
I'm saying completely caving in is not bipartisan.
I got it. Yes. Okay. Look,
working together.
Let me say it a different way, if I can, and tell me if I'm not answering your question directly. It used to be in the United States Congress, and I served with 8 presidents. I served with, so how old I am, I was 29 when I served with Richard Nixon until he left office. I served with Gerald Ford. I served with a lot more Republicans than Democrats. And it used to be we would use the word compromise. And what compromise meant was no one had to give up on their principle, but they'd search and search to determine where each side could give without giving up on a fundamental principle, but compromising on the difference within the framework that they could accept. Compromised, I will not quote the particular leader on the other team now. He said, compromise, I'm paraphrasing, is capitulation. We don't think compromise is capitulation. If you didn't engage in compromise in this country, we'd be in trouble going all the way back to George Washington. There's a lot of people today, here's what's changed the most since I got to the Senate. I got to the Senate when there was still a lot of real division. I got there when there was still the old segregationists were there, when Strom Thurmond was there, when Jim Eastland was there, when there were great differences on civil rights. But at the end of the day, it was never made personal. You could challenge and go after a man's judgment or a woman's judgment and go like until the hammers of Hades and why they're wrong on their judgment. But you didn't turn around and say, because you have that view, you're not a Christian. Or because you have that view, you're not American. Or because you have that view, you're not a decent person. What's happened, and Bobby could write a book on this, what's happened on both sides now, is if you disagree, somehow you are bad. It's like a moral judgment people are making. And that's ridiculous. Let me tell you a real quick story. When I first got to the Senate, there was a great man, some of your parents may remember, a guy named Mike Mansfield, a majority leader from Montana. They called him Iron Mike. He was one of the most revered members of the United States Congress. And he wasn't liberal, conservative. He was just a straight, they called him Iron Mike. And I remember going in one day when I first got to the Senate. When I first got to the Senate, I was down in Washington before I got sworn in, hiring a staff. And I got a phone call that a tractor trailer had just broadsided my wife and my 3 children and killed my wife and killed my daughter. And my 2 sons were very badly injured and not expected to make it. And so I was not in the mood to go to the United States Congress. I didn't want to do that. And this guy, Mike Mansfield, and a couple other senior guys said, look, just come 6 months and come down for 6 months. We need you, and then leave. You owe it to your wife and your daughter because they worked so hard to get you there. Only 1,700 people in history have ever been senators at that time. So you do it and then leave. Just get us going. Well, it turned out I didn't realize they were just trying to get me engaged and to help me, probably save my sanity. But I used to go every single Tuesday to meet with this majority leader who was then in his 70s. And I'd walk in and sit across from his desk, and he'd sit there smoking his pipe, and he'd give me assignments. And I thought everybody who was a freshman got assignments. I didn't realize no one got assignments. He was just sort of taking my pulse to see if I was right after my wife died and after my daughter was killed. And so one day I walked in, and I just walked off the floor of the Senate. A guy who became a friend of mine, Senator Jesse Helms from North Carolina, very conservative guy in civil rights, and he didn't get along, and I didn't get along in his view on civil rights. And he was on the floor of the Senate, and he was going on and on about a thing called the Americans with Disabilities Act, who was sponsored by a guy named Bob Dole, a leading Republican candidate for president, very conservative guy. And he was saying, this is wrong, we shouldn't do this. The American Disabilities Act says, you know, you should be able to have trolleys, disabled people can get on, you should have ramps in public places so disabled people could get in and out of the buildings in their wheelchair, all those kinds of things. And Jesse was making the case that it cost too much money, it wasn't the government's responsibility. And so I came in and sat across from Senator Mansfield and learned one of the most important lessons of my career. It's an absolutely true story, my word is abiding. I sat there, he looked at me, he said, I was mad. And he said, what's bothering you, Joe? And I said, that Jesse Helms, I said, he has no heart. He's out there. I can't believe this guy's out there talking about not helping the handicapped and not, I just can't believe the things he's saying. And he went, calm down. He said, what would you say if I told you that, this is 1973, that Jesse Helms and his lovely wife, who I still keep in contact, Dot Helms, what would you say if I told you that 2 years ago, I think it was 1970, could have been 69, they were sitting in their home in Raleigh, North Carolina, reading the Raleigh Observer, and there was an ad in the paper of a young man in braces, I think he was 15 years old or 14 years old, who said, it was in an orphanage, who said, all I want for Christmas is to be part of a family. He said, what would you say if I told you Jesse Helms, remember, I'm ripping Jesse Helms for not caring about the handicapped. He said, what would you say if I told you Jesse Helms and Dot Helms went down and adopted that young man as their own son? I said, I'd feel like a jerk. And he said, well, they did. He said, let me tell you something. He said, your job here is to disagree and challenge people's judgment, but it is not to question their motives. You don't know their hearts. You don't know their hearts. Here's the guy I was saying didn't care about the handicap. And this guy already with 3 beautiful daughters went down and adopted a 16-year-old or 14-year-old handicapped man. When Jesse died, I was one of only 2 Democrats to go to his funeral. And Dot brought the whole family and me aside. And his, I think, 54-year-old son in braces still walked out and gave me a hug. Folks, the problem what we have to get rid of in politics is not partisanship. It's the bitterness. It's the judgment about, if you disagree with me, you must be immoral. You don't know the other man or woman's motive. You have no right, in my view, to deal with it that way. And until we get away from that, you're going to have people unwilling to compromise in anything because guess what? They're compromising with the devil. They're compromising with a bad guy. Both sides. Both sides. That's the infection right now in American politics. And it's not limited to Republicans, not limited to Democrats. It's just a bad place to be. Because think about it, guys. We're the most heterogeneous nation in America, in the world. You can't define America based on race. You can't define America based on religion. You can't define America based on historical culture. You can't define America that way. We are defined by the document we all subconsciously agree to. It's called the Constitution. It says all men are created equal, endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. That's the distinguishing feature about us. Every other nation you can think of, with notable exceptions, is defined by their culture, defined by their ethnicity, defined by their religion. We are not. And we will spin apart like a gyroscope out of kilter if we all of a sudden become axiomatic. I fear the man who's the only one who's seen God. I fear the guy who's the only one that knows the revealed truth. I fear the guy or the woman who is absolutely certain that they know what's right and everyone else is wrong. That's not America. That's not America. We're getting by it. We're getting past it. Yes. By the way, Arnie's smarter than I am. He can I'm just told one more question. Let's do 3 more, and I'll do it quick.
Let me have the mic for a moment.
He's not going to let go of that mic. Okay. The Secret Service tells him that, so you better get to the mic.
Okay, got it. Well, good day, and thank you for being here, Vice President Biden and Mr. Duncan. So, I have 4 children. I'm a single mom. I lost 60% of my income in the last 5 years, right? And I did everything that I knew to do, that I was told to do, you know, the investments, all of those sorts of things, and it didn't work out. So here it is, I have a business, right? I'm a small business owner, and I'm looking around and I'm thinking, you know, those multi-billion-dollar corporations, they get some really great breaks. And I'm just wondering, what does your administration, President Obama, what have you done and what do you plan to do in the future for small business owners who I think are the backbone of our economy?
First of all, if my mom were here, she'd look at you and say, God love you, dear. God love you. That's right. Now look, a number of things. Since we've come into office, we have initiated and passed over 17 tax breaks for small businesses. We think, for example, that if you, in fact, are going to invest in anything, you'll be able to write it down in a year. We think you should be in a position where you are able to, if you were to sell, you would not pay any capital gains on the sale of your business if you're going into another business. We think that your tax rate should not be the one going up. We think the tax rate should be, for middle-class people and small businesses, actually going down. And we think we can do that by changing the corporate tax structure so everybody pays at 28%, the large corporations. And because right now, manufacturers pay at 35%, it's set at above 30%, but you're having people paying at 17%, not 28%. We think changing the tax code to give you greater opportunity, but also that's why we've also given, in the jobs bill, we wanted to make sure you're in a position to be able to get a tax write-off for every new employee you hire in this difficult time. And if you hire a veteran, up to $8,000 tax break for hiring a veteran if you have any employees. With regard to health care for you and your employees, that's why there's a 35% tax break for people who are self-insured in terms of help for small businesses. And next year, in 2014, actually, it goes to 50%. So there's a whole range of reasons, but here's what I'd like you to do. I'm not going to be leaving immediately. I'm going to ask a guy on my staff. You see Jose there? He's smarter than I am. I'm going to ask you to get with Jose. Let me get your specific details about your business, and there may be things we can be of assistance to, including SBA loans. Including SBA loans. Okay? All right? Okay. All the way in the back behind my Olympian, the guy in the blue shirt up there. And it sounds like I shouldn't have called on him, huh? Is that what you're telling me? You all know him?
Okay. If re-elected in the fall, do you have any further plans to better education, not only in colleges or universities, but in public primary and secondary schools?
Absolutely. By the way, I'm going to make a brief comment. And by the way, the big guy going to get to answer. No, the next question. Wait, let me answer this one first. Hang on, Jack. Hang on. Let me answer this one first, okay? I'm going to turn to Arne for this, but let me say 3 things really quickly about elementary and secondary education. None of this matters. None of this matters if, remember what I've said throughout the discussion of college affordability, qualified students. Qualified students. The only way you get a qualified student is have a quality high school, quality middle school, quality grade school, quality preschool education. And there's two things that are really important. 2 things that are really important. Every expert, as your parents can tell you, and as some of you know, and your teachers can tell you, every expert has finally reached a consensus, liberal, conservative, left, right, center, that the most formative years for a child in terms of the learning curve they'll be on is when they're 3 years old to 5 years old. So every major study has shown, and now there's a consensus, that if you can get quality education, quality exposure to kids that young, it exponentially increases their prospects of graduating from high school. It exponentially increases their prospects of staying out of trouble, not being arrested. It has a phenomenal impact. For example, we talk about this education gap between people. Well, guess what? If you come from a home, whether you are African American, whether you are poor white, whether you are poor African American, poor white, or poor Asian, and you come from a home that is below or living in poverty, you start off in first grade with a vocabulary about half the size of the kid coming from the house where the person has a mom and dad who went to college. So that gap is the day you enter school. The day you enter school. It's not an intelligence gap, it's exposure. Start off, think about it. If your vocabulary is half what your classmate sitting next to you is, what's the likelihood you can keep up in reading? What's the likelihood you can keep up in any subject? So early education, and we're the first administration to invest considerably in early education. It's now not just Head Start. Head Start's important. But guess what we found out about Head Start? Quality Head Start makes a difference. So quality teachers teaching Head Start. Quality performance in Head Start. And there's other programs. But let me turn it over to Arne from there.
I'll be very brief. I think you can't wait for this next question, so let me go very, very fast. What the Vice President just said, that early childhood piece is so important. If our babies can enter kindergarten ready to learn and ready to read, they have a huge opportunity. We have to get out of the catch-up business. We have far too many young children entering kindergarten who don't know their letters, who don't know their numbers. And that's really tough on the best of our kindergarten teachers, so we have to think about that. Secondly, we have to think about the next generation of great teachers we're going to bring into the profession. And can I ask all the teachers here to please stand, and let's give them a round of applause and thank them for all their hard work. Great teachers, great principals make a huge difference in young people's lives. And I think as a country, we've beaten down educators. We have to elevate the profession. We have to strengthen the profession. Not everyone agrees with me, but I've talked very publicly that we should double starting teacher salaries, that a great teacher should be able to make $130,000, $140,000, $150,000. And let me be clear, no one goes into education to make $1 million. Teachers are the most altruistic people I know, but you also shouldn't have to take a vow of poverty to do that work. And so as we recruit this next generation, we're going to lose the baby boomers. We're going to have about 1 million teachers retire over the next 4 to 6 years. And our ability over the next 4, 5, 6 years to attract and to retain great talent is going to shape public education for the next 30. It's literally a once-in-a-generation opportunity. And we're going to spend a lot of time, not just this year, but the next 5 years, thinking about attracting that great talent. And then finally, why we're here today, making sure college is accessible and affordable. And if we can do that, if young people aren't just thinking about graduating from high school, but taking that next step on the education journey, then we're going to have the strong country that the Vice President talks about. But it's got to be cradle to career. Great early childhood education, great K-12 education, great higher education. Last word, yes, sir.
Question for Joe Biden. Mr.
Yes,
Joe
sir,
Biden.
I got it. I thought you were looking for me.
I was looking for you. My question is, why prices on gas increasing? You know what I mean?
Hey, man. He obviously has a car. Hey, look. It's complicated. You'd fully understand it. I'm going to give you a brief answer. And remembering that famous admonition of Samuel Clemens, he said, all generalizations are false, including this one. But I'm going to give you it as quick and as straight as I can. Number one, the international, to use a fancy word, exigencies of the oil market are amazing. For example, every time there's talk about war with Iran, a major oil producer, because Iran says if there is war, they will take out the Saudi oil fields and the Bahraini fields, they will attack them. Every investor, the big guys who make these judgments about the futures, it's called the futures market, who say, well, look, we've got to hedge against that happening, so we got to assume that oil may go to, it's now high, artificially high at over $100 a barrel. It could go to $200 a barrel, and so the future, and all that, what it does, it drives up the price of oil in anticipation, even when there is enough supply. And so what's going on now are two things that no president, Democrat or Republican, control. One is called the Arab Spring. You all know about that. What happened in Libya, what happened in Tunisia, what happened in Egypt, what happened in Bahrain is happening now, etc. Now, they are some of the biggest oil producers in the world. So when the war in Libya occurred, Libya was a producer of a significant amount of oil. When the rebels attacked and the world supported them, that oil came to a screeching halt. So that was a lot less oil on the international market. I'm treating this answer like I would if I were answering on Meet the Press, so I hope I'm not offending anybody by just going straight to it. But here's the deal. Oil is what they call fungible. It means that it has a world price. There's not a price for oil in Saudi Arabia and a price for oil in Canada and a price for oil in Latin America. It's all one price because you can go anywhere and pick it up. So it's all the same price. Now, what's happened is that as this discontents occurred, no one knows where that Arab Spring is going to go. Let me give you an example. Egypt. Egypt had this revolution. The revolution occurred. They threw out a dictator. They threw out a long line of folks. The military looked like they were in charge. Now they have their elections. And the Muslim Brotherhood and the Cephalists have won an overwhelming majority. Now they're about to form a government. They're about to elect a president. So what happens if they elect a president that is as hostile to the West as, I'm not predicting this, but what happens if they elect that's as hostile to the West as Iran is to the West? What does that do? What happens in the other countries? What happens in Bahrain, where they have an overwhelming majority of Shia, and yet the Sunnis run Bahrain, a major oil producer? And you can go down the list. No one knows. We're trying to manage these outcomes in ways that will give some stability. But the world markets, they don't think about that. They just hedge against the bets. It's like a little bit like saying, okay, you know, the forecast is 30% chance of rain. Well, some of you would bring an umbrella. Most of you would say, it's 70% in a life. Guess what? The market's 30%. It's going to rain. I better go buy an umbrella. And so it's kind of what they do. That drives the price of oil up. Not manipulating. It's not these guys. There are manipulators. There's not these guys out there saying, we're going to make a lot of money now, and we're going to do this. It has to do with the world market. Now, we knew that when we came to office. That's why since we've been in office, let me give you a few numbers. There are more oil and gas rigs working in the United States of America right now today than all the rest of the world combined. Let me say that to you again. More oil and gas rigs in America than all the rest of the world combined. When you hear about we should drill more, we are environmentally drilling everywhere that we can. We are producing almost 700,000 barrels of oil more. It's 7, right? 700,000? Is that correct? 650,000 more barrels of oil per day than the day we came into office. Second thing the president realized we have to do is not just enough to produce more energy, we have to be more energy efficient. So the president has doubled, with the support of the Congress, well, not all the Congress, but the president has doubled the mileage requirement for American automobiles to 54 miles a gallon by the end of this decade. That will save people at the gas pump $1.7 trillion. That's hundreds of billions, tens of billions of barrels of oil not consumed, because that's the biggest driver of energy cost. The third thing the president has said, and this is where we have a big debate with the other team on that. They didn't think we should double mileage. They didn't think we should insist cars get more mileage. We're of the view that we have the technology to maintain performance and significantly increase mileage, and it's in the national interest to do so. The fourth thing we did was the president came along and he said, look, we have to do all of the above. We have to take advantage of all the oil we have in the United States and off our shore that we can soundly get. We have 100 years of natural gas, shale oil, below the surface of the continental United States. We know we can get it, but we have to do it environmentally soundly. There's a thing called fracking. They got to go crack the rock in order to get it out. You can environmentally do that well, and you can environmentally do it poorly. If you do it poorly, you use up the water aquifer, you create, in some cases, the argument is earthquakes, a whole lot of things. But we are spending a lot of time and money figuring out how to do it environmentally sound way. But here's the big difference we have with our friends. We think we should be investing in the energy of the future. Alternative energy, renewable energy, biofuels, solar energy, wind energy, nuclear. And folks, I want to remind you of one thing. You say, well, wait a minute. The government shouldn't be involved in that. The government shouldn't be subsidizing startups of these organizations. The government, guess what? Why do you think for years and years and years from the beginning, we gave oil companies gigantic tax breaks? What was the reason to do it? To encourage them to go drill. Because for every hole they dig, they come up dry. I don't know what the percentage is, but it's more than they come up with oil. And it costs a lot of money to drill. So we said to the oil companies for the last 50 years, we're going to give you a tax break. But here's the point. Oil companies don't need encouragement to drill. They've made more money than God in the last couple years. I mean, seriously. It's astronomical profit. I'm not criticizing the profit, but it's astronomical. But our guys in the other team, instead of us spending money to help startups in areas like solar and wind, what's happened? They want to continue to give a $4.5 billion tax break to the largest oil companies in America. They need that tax break like I need another. Anyway, they don't need that tax break. So again, it's about show me your budget and I'll tell you what you value. And my question is, the only way we can avoid what will happen again, Oil prices will come down, gas prices will come down, whether it's in 2 months or a year, whenever they do, they'll come down, sure as the devil, they'll come down. But guess what? The next crisis. What would happen, for example, it didn't happen, what would happen if Putin, all of a sudden the opposition said he did this in an election or that, and there was chaos in Russia? Russia is a major oil producer. Major. They supply almost all the gas for Europe, and they supply a significant amount of the oil. If there is political disruption in Russia in the future, and I'm not predicting that to the press, that is not a prediction, I want to make it clear. It's an illustration. It's an illustration. If that were to happen, what happens? Now, all that gas and oil going from Russia to Europe isn't going there, so guess what? All the European countries, now they go to Saudi Arabia, and now they go to Venezuela, and they go to Canada. What happens? There's more people competing for that same amount of oil, and the price goes up. The only way to protect us from this is to get energy independent. And there's no way to get energy independent unless you do all of the above, including solar, wind, geothermal, and the rest. And that's why I get confused by our friends who don't think we should do any of that and continue to generate tax incentives for oil companies who are making over $1 billion a year. That's the part we don't get, but it's a real difference. Now look, two more things on energy. One, we are now producing more domestic energy than any time we have in 8 years, and we are less dependent on foreign oil than any time in the last 16 years. 50% reduction. We're below 50%. And so the only way to keep it from happening again, it will spike again in 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, because of international arrangement, is to make sure that we are able to say, we don't need your oil. We are okay. Ladies and gentlemen, you've been wonderful. I can see the principal looking at me. They're getting very mad at me. Thank you all so very, very much. I love you. Go Commodores. Great to see you. Thanks. Where am I going? Am I starting over here?